What's up, everybody? Hello and welcome to Not Your Average Meta, an MTG Commander channel dedicated to bringing you decks and commanders you wouldn't normally find in your average meta. This week's video is brought to you by our new channel sponsor, International MTG. If you're looking for competitive pricing on your favorite MTG cards old and new, be sure to check out the International MTG store and TCG Player, link in the description of this video. We'd also like to give a special shout out to one of Not Your Average Meta's generous patrons, Martin Stanley, for everything he's done to help out the channel. On this week's episode of Not Your Average Meta, we're bringing you another fun game from the Hobby Horse featuring a rare appearance from a special channel member. This week's matchup features Ryan back trying out his own Hylda of the Icy Crown deck for himself, Patrick back again playing his Astor Bearer of Blades equipment deck, Fallgirl playing a deck he built for a viewer of the channel being led by Lyzolda the Blood Witch, and the return of Gavin after his over 6-month channel hiatus playing the most impressive deck the channel has seen in a while being led by Sheoldred. Now that we've our fighters, let's step into the Thunderdome and see which deck will come out on top. Turn 1, Patrick plays a mountain where Fog plays a tapped Bloodfell Caves, gaining a life. Gavin plays a swamp before passing his turn to Ryan, who plays a command tower. Patrick plays a plains for turn and then pays 2 to cast a pair of Swiftfoot Boots, where Fog plays a command tower of his own. Fog then pays to cast a Rakdos Headliner before going to combat, swinging him over Patrick for 3 damage. Gavin plays an Ancient Tomb for turn before tapping out in order to cast a Morbid Opportunist, which has him losing 2 life. Ryan plays an island for turn before paying 2 to cast an Everflowing Chalice, kicked once. Patrick plays another mountain for turn before paying 3 to cast a shiny Sword of Body and Mind. Fog discards a card on his upkeep to his creature's echo cost before he then draws and casts a Talisman of Indulgence. Fog then loses a life to create a black mana before casting Unearth, bringing his creature from his graveyard back into play. He then goes to combat and swings 1 creature apiece at Ryan and Gavin. Gavin plays another swamp for turn before he once again taps out in order to cast a Cryptghast. Ryan plays a plains for turn and then taps out in order to cast his commander Hylda of the Icy Crown. Patrick plays another plains and then also taps out to cast his commander Astor. This then has him looking at the top 7 cards of his library and putting in equipment into his hand. Fog discards another card on his upkeep and draws for turn. He then pays 3 and casts Mahadi Emporium Master before going to combat. He then swings both of his creatures over at Gavin, hoping he'll block, but Gavin decides to just take the damage. Gavin draws for turn and then taps out, losing 2 life once again in order to cast his commander Sheoldred. When she enters play, each of his opponents then sacrifice a creature, which has him drawing a card off as Morbid Opportunist. He then plays a land for turn before casting a pair of Lightning Greaves and then equipping it to his commander. Ryan draws for turn and then casts a Dream Shackle Geist and goes to combat, choosing to have Fog's creature not untap on his upkeep. He then plays an Azorius Chantry's his land for turn, bouncing a plains back to his hand. Patrick plays a plains for turn before paying 3 to cast a Sword of Feast and Famine, as well as paying another 2 to cast some Captain's Claws. Fog plays a mountain for turn before paying 3 to cast his commander Lyzolda the Blood Witch. He then taps his Talisman, losing another life in order to cast a Footlight Fiend. Gavin draws and then casts a Throne of Eldraine before he then casts Grey Merchant of Asphodel. The Sin has each of his opponents losing 6 life while he gains 18. Ryan replays his plains for turn before tapping out in order to recast his commander a second time. Patrick draws and then casts Open the Armory, which has him going to tutor up an equipment from his library to put into his hand. After Fog karate chops his deck, Patrick pays 3 to cast a Nettle Cyst, which enters play with a 0/0 Germ token attached to it. Fog plays another mountain for turn before he then pays 2 to sack his Archfiend in order to deal 3 damage to Gavin's Cryptghast. The Sin has the Cryptghast go into the graveyard where Fog draws a card off his commander and Gavin also draws a card off his Opportunist. Fog then pays to cast a Fireblade Artist and creates a treasure token on his end step. Gavin draws for turn and then pays to flip his commander over into the True Scriptures. The Sin has Gavin destroying 1 of each of his opponent's creatures, and in response, Fog sacrifices a creature that he targeted in order to deal 2 damage to him. Fog and Gavin then both draw a card before Gavin pays 3 to cast Vraska's Fall, which has each of his opponents sacrificing another creature and getting a poison counter. Ryan plays an island for turn and then casts an Azorius Guildmage. Patrick draws for turn and then casts a Scrap Welder before he then pays to equip the Scrap Welder with the Swiftfoot Boots as well as the Captain's Claws. Before combat, Ryan pays to tap Gavin's Grey Merchant so Patrick can then get through with 5 damage. Fog draws and then casts Faithless Looting, which has him drawing 2 cards and discarding 2 cards. He then plays a Swamp for turn and casts a Slaughter Priest of Mogus. On his upkeep, Gavin draws and then his Saga goes off, which has each of his opponents discarding 3 cards and milling 3 cards. He then pays to cast a Geth's Grimoire as well as a Smallpox, which has each player losing a life, discarding a card, sacking a creature, then sacrificing a land. Ryan draws for turn and then casts Retreat to Coralheim before passing his turn. Patrick draws for turn and then pays to equip all of his swords to his welder. He then goes to combat, hitting Gavin for 8 more damage, which triggers all of his swords. The Sin has Gavin discarding a card and milling 10 cards, while Patrick then untaps all of his lands and creates a wolf token. He then pays to cast a Charming Prince, which has him scrying 2 cards, keeping one of them on top while he puts the other one on the bottom of his library. He then pays to equip the Charming Prince with the Nettle Cyst and pass his turn. On his end step, Fog pays to sack his creature in order to deal 2 more damage to Gavin while he draws a card. After which he then untaps all of his lands and then draws for turn. Fog then plays a tapped Temple of Malice, scrying a card to the bottom of his library. Fog then pays to cast a Culligan's Command, destroying Gavin's Throne of Eldraine while he returns his Mahadi to his hand from his graveyard. Gavin draws for turn and then the 3rd chapter of his saga finally goes off. The Sin has each player returning all the creature cards from the graveyards back into play under Gavin's control, while Gavin then exiles his saga and returns to play as Sheoldred. Grey Merchant of Asphodel then hits play, which has each of his opponents losing 18 life while he then gains 54. Gavin then goes to combat, swinging Rankle over at Patrick for 3 damage, and after damage is dealt, he has each player draw a card and lose a life. Ryan plays a Plains for turn, which has him scrying a card, keeping it on top of his library before he passes his turn to Patrick, who draws for turn. Patrick then goes to combat and swings all out at Fog, who in response pays to sacrifice his own commander to deal 2 damage to Patrick and draw a card before he then gets taken out of the game. The Sin has Patrick untapping all of his lands and creating another wolf token while Gavin loses half of his creature army. Patrick then passes his turn to Gavin, and everybody realizes they can't deal with Gavin's board state, so they just scoop the game up to Gavin. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe in order to see more games and decks you wouldn't normally see in your average meta.